In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. This is episode 9, Andrew and Jerry Save Manhood. I'm Andrew Langer.
I'm Jerry Rogers,
and we're getting once again Eeyore-ish Jerry today.
Yes.
It's something. At some point in time, we need to do an episode. Andrew and Jerry Save Eeyore. Lots going on. We're going to be joined in just a bit by Guy Shepard. He is the founder of Planned Man. Jerry, is that
Planned Man? Yes, indeed.
Planned Man. We're going to have a wide-ranging conversation. Jerry's known Guy for some time. I've met Guy on a handful of occasions. Originally, we were going to have him on just to talk about the Joe Rogan controversy, but there is so much more. And Planned Man.
Well, what's interesting, Andrew, is he's written about Guy, and the editors have written about Joe Rogan. So goes Joe Rogan, so goes the world. But he has a story up just last night. The editors at Planned Man said, saying, sorry, accepted. A no handshake forgiveness for Louis C.K.
I like that.
So we're going to have a good time. Good. Guy is a defender of functionality over perfection. Let me just give you a precursor. Planned Man is stated purpose is to solve men's problems at scale, but do it in such a way that you get the support of the wives, the sisters, the mothers, and the girlfriends. And so this is not a men's only site. It is a way to make men better, but also a great advocate for the arts and books and very interesting politics on this page and cultural insights.
Well, and that's important because we have lost this, right? It's really interesting. We'll get into this with Guy when he comes on. But if you think about it, for the longest time, it's funny. I had a conversation yesterday, Monday morning, regarding the passing of Ivan Reitman. Had this conversation with John Justice and Drew, but about the teen sex romp comedies of the 80s, late 70s into the 80s,
Porky's
into the 90s. Yes, very few of which hold up, by the way. But talking about sort of this men's culture and how men's culture, especially into the 90s, with magazines like FHM and Maxim, became overly sexualized. Yeah. Whereas, we're now seeing, I think, a real return across culture in many ways. I mean, obviously, there is this pushback against what the left calls toxic masculinity. But in response to that,
which by the way doesn't exist. I mean,
no, of course not.
What they consider toxic masculinity are boys playing football.
Well, right. It gets into what I'm going to get to, where you have shows like Jack Reacher or Yellowstone and 1883, and actually 1883 is really more about women's empowerment than anything else. But things that are celebrating manhood and strong men. It's funny because you and I had a conversation yesterday, Jerry, and we'll get Guy's take on this. A friend of ours, the husband of a friend of ours and colleague of ours, talking on social media about his son being in public school and the kids not being allowed to run during gym class.
They have to skip.
Which is insane. Tell you what, before we get to that, Jerry, because we got a couple minutes before Guy joins us.
I think we have to mention one thing in particular.
Please.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the worst news ever, PJ O'Rourke passed away.
Well, tell you what, hold on for 1 second. We'll get to that in a moment because I want to go to, we didn't actually announce it last week, and I felt bad about it. A couple of folks asked me, but we have to go to our Ripped from the Headlines segment.
Ripped from the Headlines.
So, Jerry, PJ O'Rourke passed away yesterday, and it's interesting because you and I had or he passed away, I guess, the other night, but we got wind of it yesterday. You and I had a conversation yesterday about when you knew you were no longer that you were not a libertarian, that you were truly a conservative.
Right.
And it gets down to this. PJ O'Rourke was writing at a time when I think the lines were much more blurred, and even the libertarians were sort of embracing a more realistic view of the world. But talk a little bit about this. I met PJ O'Rourke on a couple of occasions. Most notably, he and I got to hang out at a Trump event in New Hampshire in 2016 during the primaries, which was an amazing evening. But go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, I had the chance to meet PJ O'Rourke on several occasions as well. And again, reading his books helped shape my political philosophy.
Yeah.
In fact, in many ways, they were different, but their impact on me was similar. I realized that talk radio could actually be useful.
Yes.
The summer of 1988 or 89, I was working a construction job like a good Bronx Irish kid. And I'm listening to my Walkman, and I was listening to the Yankees post-game show, or Yankee, the Yankees were not on, but they were having Yankee talk, and I was listening to it. And then it was interrupted by this new program with this guy, Rush Limbaugh. Yes. And I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh and had never heard of him. And I thought to myself, my goodness, yes, if only more people would speak the truth, more people would listen. And then around the same time, I came across Parliament of Whores and other books and other writings by PJ O'Rourke. And it was like a 1-2 combination of reality for me, that if you spoke the truth, if you stuck to conservative principles, if you also engaged the culture and had wit and humor, oh my goodness, you could persuade and you could tip the scales. What an important voice. And he was only 74. I know that he was struggling. I didn't know. I know now he was struggling with lung cancer. And so it's sad that PJ O'Rourke is no longer with us.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jerry. And it's interesting because, as you talk about the importance of talk radio and what you learned from PJ O'Rourke, I'm reminded of this other story that's out of the headlines, which is this story about the Levi's brand CEO or brand president, Jennifer Say. And I pulled this up, and I should put my glasses back on because I want to read this, because you and I, obviously, not that I want to talk about you're messing around with your current gig, but one of the things you and I have talked about over the last couple of years, especially in the age of COVID, was the policing of language about things. And I want to read this to you, and I want you to tell me. Well, listen, I know I heard this a number of times while I was still on terrestrial radio. But I got this. Here. These are 2 paragraphs from Jennifer Say's piece on Barry Weiss's Substack. In the summer of 2020, I finally got the call. Quote, when you speak on behalf of the company. Our head of corporate communications told me, urging me to pipe down. I responded, my title is not in my Twitter bio. I'm speaking as a public school mom of 4 kids, end quote. But the calls kept coming from legal, from HR, from a board member, and finally from my boss, the CEO of the company. I explained. Now, Jerry, tell me if this is not reminiscent of moments that you've had and I've had. I explained why I felt so strongly about the issue, citing data on the safety of schools and the harms caused by virtual learning. While they didn't try to muzzle me outright, I was told repeatedly to, quote, think about what I was saying, unquote.
Well, again, that phrase has been said to me across the desk.
Yeah.
Again, early on, I was opposed to the extended lockdowns. Early on, I was opposed to cloth mask mandates. Early on, I was a proponent of Operation Warp Speed. I wrote about it, talked about the medical miracle of the public-private sectors coming together to put forward the vaccine. But at the same time, opposed to mandates because of the novel vaccine. The science is still developing. And if people, again, risk, someone like me, I'm older, I'm heavyweight. I have other conditions. So therefore getting the vaccine versus ventilator. I'll take vaccine at any day. But however, other people, younger people, like we know now, 0 to 29, your infection fatality rate is virtually zero.
You know, it's funny as we say this, is I'm going to police your language now, right? Because we want to make sure this video stays up. So, you know,
and again, that's the great irony here. And again, we'll talk with Guy Shepherd about this.
Absolutely.
Why he wrote about so goes Joe Rogan, so goes America, because the fact is that there are things that 9 months ago, if you said it, you would be banned, canceled, fired. But today we know it's the truth. And this is the thing. Science shouldn't be dogma.
Absolutely. 100%.
And when it becomes dogma, it becomes religion, and science ought to be questioned, debated, and science changes.
I got into it. I got into it. And again, my apologies to our good friend Cameron Gray, who warned me about this, but you and I both know that every once in a while you get drawn into these attacks. I'm not even going to tell you social media fight. I'm going to even tell you which social media group it was.
I love it.
But I got into it. Actually, I got into it here because the first part had been a guy had written a lengthy screed in which he claimed to have proven why right-wingers were wrong about all of this stuff you've been talking about, Jerry. And I pushed back on every point that he made and talked about very much that issue of science, and science being an ongoing inquiry, review and analysis and checking, etc. And the guy wound up blocking me. And I wrote something else, and a guy brought up an analogy where he tried comparing the Joe Rogan, Neil Young, Joni Mitchell situation to, and that should tell you where I was having this discussion, to people not wanting to loan out their lawnmowers or to give their lawnmowers to a lawn mowing loaner service. And he went down this lengthy screed. And I think what got this person very angry, I said, okay, so what you're saying is that if the lawnmowers are being used to beautify someone's lawn for a gay wedding, therefore I have the right to pressure the lawn mowing service to not loan out the lawnmowers. Right? Is that what you're saying? And then the person got very angry with me and ended the conversation.
But again, I love it how the left often has to go to these metaphors or these extreme positions. The fact of the matter is,
I like the metaphor because it didn't really, in the end, it helped me prove my point. But go ahead.
Right, but the bottom line is that we should be able to talk plainly. When you hear a politician, or when you hear a public health official or an entertainer, I love it how entertainers now, like Neil Young, are now they're scientists. See, Joe Rogan has on his program experts of true diversity. Right to the left, diversity depends upon the pigmentation of your skin. For the rest of us, diversity means a diversity of opinion, diversity of ideas, a diversity of culture, etc. And so he has a diversity of opinion, diversity of voices. What is Neil Young? Who is Neil Young? Oh, by the way, Neil Young's back up on Spotify.
Yes. I was going to bury the lead on this.
It's now obvious that capitalism, all of these, social democrats, really at the end of the day, they're all about free enterprise, because Neil Young, right, 75, has been. And again, I think his music is screechingly, excruciatingly annoying.
Neil Young's music,
I don't, and I never have. But the bottom line is that he did all this not because he cares about the public debate. He did it because people are now listening to Neil Young music.
Well, yes, that's I mean, listen, I'm not going to say that he intentionally sort of invoked the Streisand effect. I think that Neil Young, like a lot of entertainers, is arrogant enough to think that he could flex that kind of power on Spotify and that they would actually jump to it, as though he were, let's say, Bruce Springsteen, or I don't know. I mean,
Robert Plant.
Robert. Well, okay, but listen,
or Drake, as if he's Drake.
Yeah, or Snoop Dogg, or what's her name? Mary J. Blige. Yes,
I love it how all of the today's 30-somethings are like, oh, the Super Bowl, it was about us and party, and it was so. No, it wasn't. It was about us, Andrew.
Yes.
Dr. Dre was in NWA, right?
Yes.
Their albums came out when we were in high school.
Yes.
And Snoop Dogg.
But yes.
No. I won't say it, but the
NWA's first album, F the Police.
F the Police came out in 1986.
No, it didn't.
Yes, it did. Yes,
no,
it did. Yes, it did. 1986.
All right, now I got to fact check this to make sure it's not fake news, Jerry.
1986, NWA comes out with F the Police. Absolutely.
All right, hold on.
All right, here we go.
No, I'm
and also Snoop Dogg's in his 50s. These are generation
1988, Jerry. 88.
Well, 88.
I mean, still, but you're still right. I mean, I was in high school.
Well, when all right, I seem to remember. I seem to remember arguing over that album as a senior in high school.
But you graduated in 86 or 87?
87.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, no.
Okay, regardless, 88. Regardless. I mean, we grew up in the 80s.
Listen, we split the difference. I was still in high school in 88. You were not, because you're an old man.
I was a freshman. I was a freshman.
Yes.
In college.
Yes.
But the bottom line is that Neil Young is no Dr. Dre.
Well, okay, but again, in terms of relevance and cultural hold, I would say that Neil Young was right. So 20 years ago, Neil Young was still where Dr. Dre is now.
20 years ago?
Because there's a 20-year difference in the span of their career.
So the year 2002?
Yes.
No.
Neil Young still had a cultural hold.
Neil Young hasn't been relevant since 1970.
Oh, hey, don't forget. Neil Young did release that song after 9/11 about storming the cockpit.
Yeah, the song that no one remembers.
No, let's roll. I mean, he released that, but if you think about it, in 1998, 2008. Yeah, 2008. Anyway, not to sort of get into this. Neil Young still had a cultural relevancy.
Well, listen, the bottom line on my dig on the Super Bowl party halftime show is that artists look. Elvis really was, right. Elvis came of age in the 50s, and by the 70s, it looked like he was an old man.
Yeah,
he wasn't. I mean, a lot of those 1970 Elvis's performances are fantastic, and his From Memphis album and some other albums were great albums. But the point is that I think time and time span and what we think about time is different today. Where Dr. Dre is 56 years old, that I know for sure. He's 56, and he came of age when we were coming of age. And he belongs to us. Not that he was my type of music, but he's our time. But however, if you're a kid who grew up in the late 90s, Dr. Dre was still relevant. If you're a kid today, Dr. Dre, it just shows you that age matters less, and that artists have the ability to cross over into generation to generation to even generation.
By the way, and this gets into a whole post-racial thing. If you think about the demographics that listen to NWA and Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. But Jerry, listen. Jerry, I'm cognizant of the time. We got to bring our guest on.
But we'll just say one last thing, though.
Please.
Hip hop is they said it at the Super Bowl. Hip hop is the number one music form in America today.
Yes.
And African American males make up 6% of the population.
Yeah.
So if hip hop is number one, it's because white people, black people, gay people, straight people, tall people, fat people, all people listen to hip hop. And
we will ask Guy Shepherd about this as we start our expert advice segment.
Expert advice.
Well, welcome to our expert advice segment here on episode 9. We're very pleased to be joined by our guest. His name is Guy Shepherd. He is the founder of Planned Man, which is a website. It's a cultural website, plannedman.com. Also, Guy, the host of Under the Influence. Tell us a little bit about Planned Man, and tell us about Under the Influence.
Well, Planned Man is a site that I launched with my son, who's 24. And the basic idea about it is that I don't know if you've looked at many of the men's magazines that are out there, but I think if you looked at GQ or Esquire, you would actually see pretty much clothes that you don't want to wear and articles that don't speak to you. So our thinking was that in a nation of 330 million people, half of them guys, that there would be a longing and a hunger for a site that celebrated the idea of men and serviced the idea of men. Not only do we want to kind of write pieces that kind of reconstruct kind of the idea of guy that we're going after, we want to ask and answer men's problems at scale, right? So outside of just loving and serving our families in terms of, you know, kind of doing our jobs, we're expected to figure out like what a 503B, you know, it's like all these things we don't know.
Sure.
And what we do is we put good reporters on them. We can do the research for them, and we give them qualified things that they can click on.
You know, it's funny because Jerry and I were just talking about this at the introduction of the show about how men's magazines in the 90s were so overtly sexual, the FHMs and the Maxims of the world. And you know, you could read things like Popular Science, Popular Mechanics, and get some of the, it's so funny because I think, you know, my brother, you know, so I'm not going to mention his name. You've met my brother before. And he has become a real handyman. I'll tell you something. We had a moment over the weekend, and
is this the brother who makes his own furniture?
This is the brother who makes his own furniture.
He's turning Amish, I think.
Well, we got together over the weekend. My brother bought a table saw over the weekend because we're getting ready to make some picnic tables for my other brothers. What he has is exactly right. And we had to consult. It's funny. A couple of times we had to consult some videos on YouTube. Which seems to be where people are turning. This is what you're talking about when you're talking about serving man and manhood at scale, is trying to find a place where real guys can come and find real information about their real lives. Is that what we're talking about here?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there's the real thing out there is that also kind of an edifying way too, where everybody talks about the internet as being a rabbit hole. Right. What we want to do is provide a destination, like a rabbit hole for the soul, where, you know, there's enough good content there that you can get lost in it. We also have a back end where if you're reading the stuff that you like, that you can just click on it and it goes to an archive that you have of your own reading experience with the site. But that is the goal. It's the kind of to take the stuff that's out there, you know, the video on how to, you know, change a tire, how to do these basic things, how to kind of put together a good suit, and give that as well as some kind of good advice on how one can live a good life, right? But make it easy, make it accessible.
I'm chuckling because I had a conversation yesterday. I'm going to admit this on the air. I bought a suit off of Amazon. And I was dubious, right?
Because you know why? Because you're the life of Riley.
No, okay,
right? Because Andrew Langer,
I didn't buy a butlering costume, Jerry.
But my point is that I call Andrew during the day because we do work together. And where's Andrew? He's at Wegmans, or he's at the tailor, or he is getting his tires rotated. The life of Riley.
You're in your basement.
That's where I am. Yeah.
But my point is, Guy, that I called my dad because I actually was surprised at the quality of the suit, which set that aside for a moment. And my dad says to me, well, you know, you really need to go and buy your suit at Brooks Brothers, and you need to do this. I'm like, well, Dad, Brooks Brothers no longer makes, first of all, Brooks Brothers no longer makes decent clothes, and they no longer make clothes for guys my size. Like, they don't make clothes for real men anymore. And so, you know, if we're looking at Plan Man, and I get this. I grew up in Westchester. I would go to the Brooks Brothers in Eastchester and, you know, get my fancy clothes. But what is a guy supposed to do nowadays? How does Plan Man respond to that?
Well, I mean, I'll tell you how Guy Shepherd responds to it. Yes. I suggest that everybody out there trade in their traditional pants and go get some Lululemons. Right, those are the best pants in the world. You can wear them with sports jackets, and then I would say get a nice untucked shirt. Right, and I think that's the new wardrobe. You find a good sports jacket, you throw some sneakers on there, or some Vans, and I think you can walk out there in the corporate world, particularly as it's become. But I do think.
Wait a minute. So time out. Lululemon makes like actual like khaki pants.
Oh my God. I think they're called the ABC pant. And
okay.
It is the best pant.
Look, you're looking for a pen, aren't you? You know, write
I
this
am.
down.
I'm writing it. No, listen, if I go visit Plan Man, it will put all of that stuff, aggregate that stuff for
You know
me.
what? Listen, the first rule of podcasting, this really is podcasting is an evolution of talk radio. And I remember when I was a kid listening to Bob Grant, listening to the talk radio was my father gave me a little notebook and I used to keep it in my pocket, and Bob Grant or someone would say something that I wouldn't hear somewhere else and I'd write it down. And so, Andrew, you're proving the worthiness of a podcast because you get information so good you got to write it down.
Jerry, I'm pulling up exactly what Guy said. It's the Lululemon.
Pay attention to the show. Shop later. I
told you this is the life of Riley here.
I'm not out there doing things.
There we go. Look, I pulled it up. The ABC pants. Look at that.
I think that might be Guy in the middle right there too. Look, I've seen Guy come off the airplane, in the airport, and he'll have a little bag, and I'd be like, "Hey, you're here for 3 days. You have a dinner." He's like, "Jerry, it's all right in here. Don't worry, it's all here."
It folds, it rolls.
Yes,
it's made for the modern urban lifestyle of men.
So let's talk about this. I'm going to pull this up now from planman.com. Sorry accepted a no handshake forgiveness for Louis C.K. I appreciate the metaphor there, but let's talk a little bit about the Louis C.K. Situation and what the take is here, Guy.
I mean, I think you saw this earlier with David Chapelle and the goal to go after him and get him off of Netflix. You see it with Joe Rogan and Spotify. Well, it kind of happened to Louis C.K. I mean, Louis C.K. was one of the kind of early victims of the Me Too movement. Mm-hmm. And I'd say, or at least he paid the consequence of his Me Too crimes. But what the issue is, I kind of wanted to bring up is that, this other fact that Jeffrey Toobin, he's on a Zoom meeting like this, and then all of a sudden, he reveals himself that he was pleasuring himself during a call at work. I found that rather odd. But what I didn't
with female coworkers.
With female coworkers.
Right.
So it seemed like a very Louis.
Hold on. Wait, Guy, hold on. Time out. Jerry, would it have been better if there had been all male coworkers on that call? Because I'm not so sure that way. I mean, maybe for a CNN crowd it would have been better. I'm not so. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Guy. Go right ahead.
He could say, "You guys bored me." I mean,
yes.
Really got to put it out like that.
Yes.
But what I thought was there was kind of it was incommensurable, right? You had Louis C.K., who was, if you watched any of his shows, he kind of built it in. I mean, he was a world historical jerker, right? It was part of his shtick. But all of a sudden you got Jeffrey Toobin do it, and he goes to the penalty box for 6 months and comes out, and Louis C.K. has to do tours in Eastern Europe. Right. Yeah. And it's so, so I had a real sense of the thing is like, I personally don't want to live in a world without forgiveness. And I think, one of the things that's kind of characteristic of our modern age is there's, is this kind of this notion that there's good and evil and that people are good and other people are bad and there's no redemption.
Yeah.
And, I thought that, Louis had kind of paid his time. He recognized the kind of that he was outside a power relationship. When you're the head, when you are Louis C.K., you're the greatest comedy in time, asking for a consensual permission to masturbate in front of another woman, in front of a woman is not a good thing, right? He was abusing his power. I think he's learned that. But he's out there and he's kind of creating comedy that I think, that's enjoyable and that should, that he should be let back into the world, right?
Well,
this kind of idea that you ostracize people for crimes, but and that's in the same time when we're keeping him out of comedy again. It's at the same time where we don't have bail anymore. So we've 5 years ago we had no compassion. Now it seems like we have too much compassion. And regardless of where you are, I think Louis should get out of the box. He should be allowed back into public life.
I refer to the quote from the William Butler Yeats poem. The Second Coming, the best lack all conviction while the worst are filled with passionate intensity. And it seems like there's a corollary here. I was reminded of this, right?
Write that down, Guy.
Yeah. I was reminded of this back, when Bob Saget passed and folks were lauding him as America's Dad for the work that he did on Full House. And I'm thinking, well, and again, not to take anything away from his work on Full House or on America's Funniest Home Videos, but I remember when Bob Saget was a filthy comedian, and in the best sense of the word. I mean, a dirty comic, incredibly funny, and yet then he lived this very wild lifestyle for the longest time. And yet here he is being lauded. I mean, there's an interplay here, right, between sort of the Bob Sagets of the world and how they get lauded, and the Louis C.K.'s of the world. And it seems to go into your good versus evil analogy, Guy. I mean, am I right or wrong there?
Yeah, and I think what you do is decide it really determines what side you're on and whether you're against them or they perceive they're against them. I mean, I thought at the end of the piece, I kind of come out and say, I think that the Me Too movement has kind of tempered itself, right? You know, one of my favorite comedians, Ananda Ginger, my favorite one. It's not my favorite. Is not.
I know who it is.
It's
Burr?
Bill Burr.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Oh yes.
No. So I think Bill Burr's fantastic. He had this thing. It's like when the Me Too movement came out, you had the Harvey Weinsteins and other people, and it was like it looked really terrible. I mean, these people were really awful. Like this casting couch, you know, quid pro blow economics that are running through Hollywood. But then all of a sudden it looked like, I forgot the Indian comedian. This guy was getting in trouble for a bad date, you know, so there were real problems. And then all of a sudden people were complaining about bad dates. And I think we're at a point right now where I'm happy Hollywood and entertainment and media has caught up with the rest of us, because I don't think I've worked in an environment where anybody was like walking around and having sex with a ficus or something in the office place. But it's like, I think we got it, but it does show you recently, it's like, someone like, Governor Cuomo can, kind of make a decision that puts old people in nursing homes to their death. But, you act like a 1950s Italian guy in the governor's office, and that can't happen anymore.
Right.
And I don't have a problem with that. If people purport to actually, to stand up for a cause, their behavior should be in line with it, right? It's like, you're supposed to live up to your own book. And if you don't live up to your book, people find you outside of it. And one of the greatest sins in this modern world is hypocrisy.
Well, that's exactly right. We talk about this. We've been talking about this with Democratic governors pushing mask mandates. Jerry and I talked about it. Jerry called me up on Monday morning after the Super Bowl, and he's like, "Hey, so you're watching? Do you have a conversation with folks in your house about all the celebrities not wearing masks?" I said no, because I didn't want to bring that up, but that's exactly what you're talking about. Jerry, I know you have
Aziz Ansari was the comedian from Master of None. He was in Parks and Rec. And funny guy, and you're right. He went on a date, and the woman he was dating felt like the date was awkward, and all of a sudden he gets caught up in the rest of it. Here's the thing. I'm not even sure if hypocrisy is the right word for it any longer. It's more hierarchy. There are some, like the Tubins, who can go into the penalty box and come out again. And there are others who just aren't allowed out. And I think it's just that there are two standards, one by which the elite live by, or the self-appointed elite who they think they are. And the scary thing, if you're part of that establishment, is they can chuck you out at any time. Yep. I mean, look at you mentioned him already. Dave Chapelle.
Yeah.
I mean, Dave Chapelle was the king. I mean, the king. And then all of a sudden
he still is the king.
Well, I agree, but yeah.
I mean, I think he fought the hierarchy and he won. Right.
But that's it. He fought it though.
Yeah. Oh my God. He didn't fight it. He poked it.
Yeah.
Like he dragged it. I mean, he made fun of it. And I think he did it for a real purpose, where one of the reasons why I think I have a tendency of kind of focusing on, comedians and defending comedians. I really think that, the comedian is the canary in the coal mine of our discourse, right? And if you create, if the gases from our culture are coming up and it's choking off humor, Houston, we have a problem, right? There's a big problem where you listen to all these comedians say they don't want to go on college campuses anymore.
Yeah.
And then you find out that, instead of just turning the channel, going to something else that you like, right? Something called humor that's not really funny. It's like, that's what the choice is. But we live in a time where it's like, Jefferson had a beautiful formulation. Like, I don't care if you believe in one God or 20 gods, as long as you don't pick my pocket or break my bone. And the basic thing was, this is America. Let your flag fly, right? One God, 20 gods. You don't like your gender, change it, but you shouldn't coerce other people to pay for it or to bend their knee and say it's good. That is, I think, if there's something afoot that's dangerous that needs to be done, is that I think we have to get our liberal creed back as a people and recognize where we all get to pursue our happiness. And I want everybody to pursue their happiness, right? So Guy Shepherd, Plan Man, doesn't have a narrow prism of what it is to be a man, but it has a certain kind of code of conduct on what is required, right? And then what is required is let people do what they want. It's like, I'm open to even letting them hurt themselves, right? So I mean, I don't like a nanny state that gets in the way of people, but it's like, you pay for your life, you pay for the consequences of your life, and let people live, and people can look around, see 1,000 flowers, and choose what dandelion they want to be.
One thing, Guy, is in my conversations with Guy, he's been on the radio show with me a couple of times too. Two things. I'm going to ask him to explain these things, but I've stolen them and I've used them. In fact, I used it coaching football, the 4 Fs. I changed it a wee bit, but the principle of the 4 Fs. I'm going to let Guy explain it, but also I was talking to Guy just recently, and it's this idea of functionality versus perfection. And I think these are two themes that run through Plan Man that make it a must stop. So anyway, but Guy, the 4 Fs and functionality versus perfection.
Yeah, I've always thought that the moralists aren't their best friends for their own mission, where they make it too long, they make it too hard. So one of the things I did, I came up with this thing called 4 Fs. And the goal of it was to come up with an ethics that could actually you could take through your life and remember, right? So the first one, I know this is a podcast, so we're under different restrictions. I'll go through them all and then I'll describe them. It's fuck up, fess up, figure out, forgive, right? So to fuck up is human, right? But it turns out that people, particularly people who kind of want to be perfectionists or see themselves as righteous, they want to forget that they're human. So I think that to recognize that we're all fuck ups. To fuck up is human. To forgive is divine, right? But if you really want to go to a fuck up to a forgive, which is the last point, there are 2 steps in between, and the other one is fess up. We all make mistakes, but it doesn't seem like we're all as good as taking ownership of our mistakes, because they think that to do a bad thing means you're a bad person.
Yes,
which is not the case. If you never actually take ownership of your mistakes, over time you become a Pharisee and a bad person, right? But it's like you're able to kind of do that. So one thing I would say, if you make a fess up, and we've all had arguments with our wives, our friends, our coworkers, you don't have a good fess up when the person's saying, "I'm sorry I did the following, but." There can be no buts in a fess up.
Sure.
A butt is an anti-fess. It's a false fess. We don't want a false fess.
I love it.
And then it's figure out. It's like, we all make mistakes, we make messes, but it's like, why don't you clean up your fucking mess? Right? So if you've made a mess, clean it up. And then if you do all that, then you get the big hug and forgiveness. But people want to actually go right to the forgiveness without going through the process. But this is something that I think helps you in business. I think it helps you in your personal life. I think it helps you marriage. It helps you in coaching. But it's very strange, where I really think the fuck up's important, quite frankly, because I think when people realize that, listen, I'm a believer, right? But I would describe our humanity that we inherited. It's like, we're born in the likeness of God, but made out of monkey parts. It's like, we got some issues with us, right? We if you read, the 10 Commandments, it's like, you got to get it down to one. We're just a covetous people. We want other people's shit, right? And our tendency is to take that stuff or long for that. And it's like, that's why we're kind of shitty at heart. That's why we need ethics. But it shows you that I think the reason why we're fallen, it gives us the opportunity to rise and we have our own hand in our creation. But it's like, it's by actually knowing that we're shitty. It's knowing that we have a tendency towards badness and that we should not think of ourselves as perfect, because if we do, we'll probably be perfect monkeys, not actually, born in the likeness of God people.
Let me interrupt just for a second
Please.
before you talk about the functionality versus perfection, because again, before you came on, Guy, Andrew and I were talking about PJ O'Rourke and how his books, Parliament of Horrors in particular, but some others, really helped shape my political philosophy. And I had the pleasure of meeting him. When you work and play in DC and New York, you get to meet people. I didn't know him, but I met him. And I often said this. I often said our mutual friend, Steve Hayward. Steve is an intellectual, a professor, a good guy, AEI guy, but he's brilliantly funny and sharp. And I used to always tease him that he was the poor man's PJ O'Rourke. But however, I want to say this. I'm going to give Guy a compliment. Again, this is why you ought to go to Plan Man, because I'm sad that PJ O'Rourke has passed on, but I think in Guy Shepherd and Steve Hayward and some others, the spirit of PJ O'Rourke lives on. The kind of the wit, the wisdom, and the irreverence. These things matter to persuade, right? That's at the end of the day. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to persuade and influence. And so anyway, I love the 4 Fs. Maybe Andrew, we should do a PJ O'Rourke section and just have David, just have our friends on to be in that segment. Sure. But Guy, tell us about the functionality. You told me this the other day. Please. I think it's brilliant.
Well, let me tell you first, my favorite PJ O'Rourke essay, right? How to drive while drunk while getting your wing squeezed without spilling your drink. That was of his piece. And I think that, he kind of had a kind of gonzo conservatism about things, or a libertarianism. And I mean, the world is less funnier without him. And it's like, I think he showed, in some respects, what like a non-ideological cool was, right? He really, and again, to call him conservative or libertarian, I think is to do an injustice to him, because what I liked about him at core, and I think is another thing that I think we have gone too far down the road of, and there's a reason why everything's uninteresting, is that he talked about the phenomena of things. He just went right to the heart of being. He didn't bring in the edifice of labels, liberal or conservative. He spoke in a voice about a phenomena, and he did it in a hilarious way. And, again, I don't like it because it's like, I think I've lived a similar lifestyle, and I hope I live with medical science past 74 years. Man. Yeah. So, but to PJ, what do you want?
Functionality, man. Yeah. Tell me about functionality.
Is like, well, functionality is, I think, the religion of PJ O'Rourke, right? It's yes. I think it's like, for example, I wrote a piece called "A Better Defense for Bad Behavior," right? And it was just this kind of recognition on, kind of looking at our attitudes towards pleasure, right? And I kind of really came out and said, if you want to know what the root of all evil is, right, by the scientific establishment, but also the moral establishment, it's pleasure, right? And I think if you look at it that way, it's like, is pleasure evil? And I don't think it is. And I thought, it really needed to be a better defense had to be given to it. So I give it. But like when I was going down the list of, the arguments that I was making on how, we just have to learn how to do pleasure well, right? We have to learn how to, eat our chocolate cake, but not get diabetes, right? It's like chocolate cake's good, but a life dedicated to chocolate cake, you'll probably lose a couple of toes and go blind in an eye, right? But it's so it's like, you got to do it in a certain type of perception. So, the whole idea, if you see someone out there having fun and crushing it, like invariably there'll be someone looking over at the other side going, he's a functional alcoholic. And I'm like, the whole goal should be to be functional, right? The whole goal of morality. So on one level, on the way I would look at it is functionalism is the floor, right? Perfectionism is the ceiling, right? But we should all strive for functionalism.
Yes.
Functionalism is within reach, right? You know, it's like, you know, it's almost like you, if you had a kid and you're worried about him because he looks like he might trend to bad behavior, you should find a functional alcoholic to introduce him to. Like, how do you keep this together? Because my son is an idiot and it looks like he's going to go off the rails.
So listen, and I put up the screenshot of a better defense for bad behavior, and I appreciate this. It's like I'm reminded of the quote, everything in moderation, including moderation.
Oh, definitely. I mean,
you know,
I think if there's that's something I would write down too, right? No, but one of the things I've always attempted to, and I love, you know, the way that I think people think and communicate through quotes. It's like quotes are like, they're lines to live by, right?
Absolutely.
It's almost that in a great quote, you get, you know, what Jordan Peterson calls a map for meaning, right? Yeah. Like, got it. You know, that's the algorithm for the truth there, right? And I think, yeah, I think I pursue moderation moderately, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's funny because on that score, I used to talk about, and the three of us have all been involved in public policy in various guises over the years. I used to talk about well-intentioned policies and real realities, and then my father, you know, in his 80s, summarized it well, which is there are many roads to utopia, all, however, must traverse the surface of the earth. And I was like, wow. I mean, you know, this is, you know, you reach up this nugget of wisdom from on high that I use quite a bit. I want to circle back to what you were talking about in terms of comedy, Guy, because obviously that's very much in my wheelhouse. There was a really great documentary about this called Can We Take a Joke, which came out about 10 years after the Aristocrats documentary, which is I can't recommend it highly enough. Actually, this is really where I want to go with this. Because, and Guy, I don't know if you've ever seen the Aristocrats documentary. Jerry, I don't know if you've seen it.
I have,
yeah. So it's about the filthiest joke ever told. It stems off of
where Bob Saget was like a gold medal winner.
Yes, well, it gins off of
puke in their mouth.
It gins off of, you know, Gilbert Gottfried after telling a very, very ill-timed 9/11 joke 2 weeks after 9/11. Yes. He then pivoted into the at the roast of Hugh Hefner, by the way, pivoted into telling his version of the Aristocrats. And I think about this because, you know, I get embarrassed when I recommend this joke to people or this movie to people, and I really shouldn't in the end, because it gets into what this later documentary talks about, which is Can We Take a Joke, which is about now people are getting offended by this. We need truth tellers. Right. I am buoyed by the fact that, and Jerry tells me I shouldn't be buoyed by this. I am buoyed by the
I never say the word buoy.
I know you don't. I am buoyed by the fact that
I don't think I can say ooh or like buoyant. I don't know if you're floating.
I am happier by the fact that Jon Stewart is defending Joe Rogan. But I shouldn't be congratulating Jon Stewart when he does the right thing, because there's a right. My point is, this is all, you know, at least Jon Stewart is recognizing that there's a real danger in society when we start policing the language of other people, especially those who are engaged in satire. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, again, I think that, I don't know. I don't want to give comedians a special, you know, kind of protection, you know, like the media gets. But I think that, true. You know, we all should be able, you know, I mean, we're free, right? And sometimes we're free to say stupid things and wrong things and hurtful things, right? But it's like, you know, there's a difference between a stick and a stone and a joke, right? Sticks and stones break bones, right? Jokes, it usually, you know, and I think you saw that with David Chapelle and the trans woman who really he was a very good friends with Daphne. It's like, she laughed when David was making his jokes about trans.
Sure.
Because you know what she knew? She was real, right? You know, you're talking about me. That affirms me, even though you're making jokes, right? And I think I think there's this. It's an un-American, it's an unhealthy, it's a tribalistic pursuit to force other people to your conception of a good, right? And I think, like we were founded by people like I came from Massachusetts. I was founded by a bunch of jerks who fled religious persecution so they could go establish it in the new world, right? So that's the way human beings are, right? And I don't think that's I think that's a dead end for us. You add because one of the things I did, it's like I took a friend who I took a friend who's a leading Black intellectual, and I took him to watch Chris Rock. And my basic argument was, and this is a gentleman who, I'll tell you his name's John McWhorter, right? I think he's the cure for much of our problems when it comes to time.
Plan Man has a piece up right now on John McWhorter's a take on critical race theory. In fact, it's also up on Real Clear Books, that McWhorter piece.
And I mean, and this guy, I think is the cure for a lot of things, but I also saw Chris Rock as a cure for it. So, and my basic argument is, if you hear people laugh about things, right, that shows you how, that shows you there's an opportunity to bring people along, right? So Chris Rock made a group of people at the Apollo Theater, pretty much a sea of pepper, maybe a couple of sprinklings of salt in there. And he said some things that just blew the roof off the place and showed that where John was trying to take us is not a place where they don't understand and see themselves. And so there's, for those who don't think there's a hope for, reconciliation among the races, because I think people want to be divisive about this issue, read John McWhorter,
Sure.
Like watch Chris Rock's earliest specials. And it's like, it just shows you that it's there. But what stands in between us and there are these cultural guardians that just really are the death of fun. Like, they're not fun people. Like, they're not the pursuit of happiness type of people. They're living up to, of a book that is just boring and ugly and flat and without humor.
Well, right. Listen, it comes down to movies. I'll give examples. Movies like The Purge, or TV shows like The Handmaid's Tale, which are written because they're trying to make some kind of a political point, or film because they're trying to make some kind of political point. But it's a political point that falls very flat because they have a fundamental misunderstanding. It's like the movie that came out last year about, or during the pandemic, about the group of people who want to hunt down right wingers. I didn't see it.
Yeah.
But,
I did.
All of these things.
The Hunt, right?
The Hunt, right? I mean, listen. You want great movies that sort of capture, I'm not going to say reality, but sort of capture a mindset. Go back to Red Dawn, right? Red Dawn is
But Andrew, to make your point for you, that movie, The Hunt, again, it was made to be a dig, a mocking of the the MAGA folks. But at the end of the day, in that movie, the MAGA folks, right, went after and killed the Guardians. Here a guy makes a great point, and that is regular people, hard hats, police officers, teachers, entrepreneurs, aren't guided by ideology the same way the Guardians are. However, the left has been brilliant. The Guardians have been brilliant. I've said this a million times. I'll say it again. They're winning the cultural war. And here's just a proof from this week. You have college students at various colleges around the country where the mask mandate has been lifted, and you have college students protesting on their own campuses, asking for the mask mandate back. And any one of them can wear a mask if they want to, or go virtual in terms of their learning. But yet it's not enough that they can do it. They want you to do it. And this is a generation that they have ingested the Kool-Aid. And again,
there's a difference between persuasion and coercion. And I think that is the very example of it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think this is like one of the things I brought up in the Joe Rogan thing. It's saying, it's like, how did these liberals all of a sudden, who were, you know, the age of Aquarius, free love, free speech, all of a sudden become, you know, people who are kind of using their power in order to brown out other people's free speech rights, and what obviously 11 million people have. I think I looked into the numbers. You know, Joe Rogan makes $100 million. Neil Young makes $300,000. So I think it was an AG hippie punching up just so he could go off into the sunset at his ranch and feel righteous before he croaked, right? But it's like, it's terrible.
And Guy, by the way, he's back up on Spotify.
Yeah, Jerry, because, and this is what I wanted to get to, right? Because you write, Guy, about Lenny Bruce. Not that I want to make this all about comedians, but you know, you write about Lenny Bruce, and we talk about free speech and the ACLU. And Ira Glasser, who was the executive director of the ACLU, was on the Bill Maher show. And I don't watch Bill Maher very often. Happened to turn this on.
We should.
There's a new documentary out about Ira Glasser, and what he was talking about is how now the ACLU, this vaunted vanguard, to use an alliteration there, of this vaunted vanguard of protecting the free speech rights of everybody, is now subjecting potential clients to political means testing and litmus testing to make sure that their speech is something that they want to defend. And Glasser talks about the fact, and I agree with this wholeheartedly, you know, popular speech doesn't need to be protected. It is protected by virtue of its popularity. It's unpopular speech. And you're right, because you have these hippies, and I would say that the free speech movement, the anti-war movements of the 1960s, right? They were protesting a corrupt, authoritarian, or leaning towards authoritarian government, you know, abusing its power, and thought that they could replace it with a benign authoritarianism of their own, when the problem is authoritarian government.
But here's, if I could give you a shorthand about how you kind of understand, you know, Joni and Neil yesterday and today, is that I think there's a distinction worth a difference between a liberal and a progressive. I think a liberal believes in persuasion, a progressive believes in coercion, right? It's that simple, right? You know, everybody who was a liberal had an idea of the good, but, you know, they wanted 1,000 flowers to bloom. Now they just want their little tulip, right? You know, it's like, this is the truth. And, you know, I think what you should do, what a free people should do, is they should go as far as persuasion, joins them, and then not pick up the means of coercion in order to bring the rest and drag the rest around. It just doesn't seem like a proper thing to do. And particularly in light of Joe Rogan, I mean, this guy is I describe him as Walter Cronkite with sleeve tattoos, right? And, you know, and it's just like, these guys are doing like, you know, a weird, like bizarro Ted offensive, where at the net result, I mean, they're going to lose Joe Rogan. And if you lose Joe Rogan, as goes Joe Rogan, so goes America. I mean, you saw it. Rumble was ready to, you know, break out their checkbook and give him an opportunity, which could have created a new internet of something. You know, it's like, could really come out and say unicorns can be slaughtered. They can be replaced with something else that's freer. And it's like, I think Joe Rogan, I described it at one point, like going after Joe Rogan is peak woke, because it's a stupid thing to do, because they've done so well by punching down, you know, like they even go after a beautiful guy, like, you know, the guy from, what's the band? I mean, Wilton Marshall, right? He was a guy, you know, he's a banjo player from the Mumford & Sons.
Mumford & Sons.
Yeah, this guy is the most decent human being on the planet. It's like, he sent out, what was his sin? He forwarded a tweet of a New York Times bestseller that was critical of Antifa. So if you're against Maoism, that makes you pro-fascism, right? And it's like, I don't know, I don't think that's right. You know,
one thing though, and I'm interested, Guy, in your thoughts on this, but also you too, Andrew, and that is, it's something that I warn all the time. I think conservatives, when a celebrity, or when this
is what I was getting to, Jerry.
Yeah, when a famous person seems to side with them on an issue, we put that celebrity on a pedestal, and we promote the celebrity, and then
get buoyed by it.
Right, you get buoyed by it, but then eventually that celebrity goes back to form. Joe Rogan is no conservative. He is Joe Rogan, and he's a comic. He's a free thinker. He's a smart guy. He's entertaining. He likes to mix martial arts, but he's not William F. Buckley. And I think conservatives.
No, I mean, it's like,
yeah.
William F. Buckley, if he came back today in his best form, would not have 11 million people, right? But William, and I think the virtue of Joe Rogan is, getting back to, I think he's a liberal in the best sense of the word,
Sure.
Maybe even the classical sense of the word. And, I think that we all should actually rethink ourselves around it. So, the problem with the phrase, being called a conservative is that it begs the question, conserve what, right? I think, conserving a Joe Rogan liberalism is one of the things that's most important to do at this moment.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, this guy, I think, is like an embodiment, a guy expression, of the American ideal with sleep tattoos on. I mean, this is the guy who you want to come to your house for dinner. You want him at Thanksgiving, because guess what? He actually does something that I've seen very few people do. He listens. He asks questions. He lets people reveal themselves, right? And guess what? When you do that, you make mistakes, right? But it's like, again, you get back this perfectionism. Like, it's like, guess what? Science is never settled, right? If the thing that I thought was bizarre, if you looked at what Jody and Neil going, they're going after him at the weakest point of their argument. Their argument is going downhill, right? And it's like, it's like Joe's heterodoxy, his iconoclast kind of approach and with his guest. It's like, I think it raises, I think having those voices, God, we live in a free society. It's like, this is why people buy cable. It's to see the variety of the human form and ideas. It's like the idea that is not welcomed, and people want to use public health as a way to actually, destroy kind of American free speech. And because American free speech, it's the reason why we have it is because inquiry is necessary for a free society. Right. But I'm not defending your right to be wrong. I'm just saying I'm defending the process of inquiry. Right. And it's like, guess what? When you say something, you reveal yourself. If you don't like what has been revealed to you, turn the channel.
Yeah.
Right.
Guy, there's a real danger in society. Jerry and I talked about the importance of the conversation, and having those conversations is vitally important, that exchange of ideas. As speech gets attacked in all of its forms and people are discouraged from speaking out, right? Mm-hmm. Then the conversation becomes monologue. We can't solve problems in America, in our communities around the world, if we can't talk to each other. Talk a little bit about that. And then I might have a question about common ground, but talk a little bit about that.
I think it's right. It's like, the scientific method, the journalistic method, the policy method ought to be open inquiry, right? Yeah. It's to make, like, we all have to make calls, right? So, if you look at COVID, what was COVID? It's like something we didn't expect was foisted upon us. We answered it on the fly. And when you do so, you make some mistakes. But that needs to be like a feedback loop, like post-market surveillance. Yeah. And then you figure out, where did we go wrong? Where did we go right? That doesn't happen in a monologue regime. That only happens in a dialogue regime, right? So, there's a reason why it's good. I love, I think, the United States has benefited from a two-party system, right? Because you have that dialogue that's going. But, attempts to actually, kind of limit that dialogue, limit that feedback loop, I think it puts us on, it allows stupid ideas to grow that seem like their purposes for have us win Darwin prizes.
Guy, let me interject here, because Jerry has pointed out on numerous occasions that it's the most corrupt, dysfunctional governments in American society that have been a monopoly of one power over the other.
Look at the Jim Crow South. look at Baltimore City today, and again, to Guy's point, Jordan Peterson on the Joe Rogan show recently said that conversations are what make us human.
Yes.
And when you don't allow for the conversation, it impacts. We objectify and we lose part of our humanity. And the irony is that this is something, again, going back to Guy's point about progressive versus liberal. The conversation is the point. That's the point. And people reveal themselves. Look, I want the hater to be able to speak.
Amen.
So that I know it's the hater.
Absolutely.
I want to know who has the bad idea versus the good idea. This is something I've said before. Our audience has heard it. Andrew has heard it 1,000 times. But when the Puritans, right, when Guy's people came to America up in Massachusetts and New England, they didn't establish the church first. They didn't build a church first. They built a pub first, and it wasn't just to have a drink. It was to have the conversation, because conversations were important. Anyway,
Guy, before we let you go, talk a little bit about, we've talked about Plan Man, and again, planman.com. We'll put the link up on the show's various pages, but behind you, we see for those of you who are watching or who are listening, a guy here on Zoom has his logo for Under the Influence. What's Under the Influence? How do we find that?
Well, it's, I'm going to be shooting the first show this Thursday and Fridays, right? So it's coming to a theater near you. Let's say that. But the premise of the show is that, it's a play on it's truth in advertising. What we're going to do is we're going to drink and think. We're going to muse and booze. We're going to drink through a conversation, because of the whole idea that if there's something, maybe one of the problems that we have is that we live in a mothers against drunk driving culture. But I think one of the consequences of that is, I think that people, getting to Jerry's point about the idea of a public house, it's like people need to talk to each other. And I think people are better, more philosophic, more civil, right? If they have a drink in their hand, maybe not 5 drinks later, they might change into something other. But the goal of this is to get around, and have a conversation with folks that have something to say on the subject of, a planned man, and have a couple of drinks with them and talk about, their contribution to the cause. And, one of the things I liked about Jordan Peterson, and Jordan, if you're watching this, I'd like to have you on my show.
Sure. So would we.
As if you look at him, it's like, what is his success? It's like we're living in a culture now that's fixated on deconstruction. You put anything beautiful in front of somebody now, and they want to turn it into shit, right? And, they want to break it down. They want to show its origins. Well, Machiavelli said in the 15th century, it's like the origins of everything have a little bit of force and fraud in it, right? So it's like a 12-year-old trick of a child, right? It's not real, right? To kind of, it's like, we're bad. It's like, hey, not only 1619, we did genocide on the Indians, right? We did some bad shit, but guess what? It's like, we also did some good things, and there's a reason why we did it. But one of the things I like about Peterson, and I think what we want to do and mimic in this site, is we don't want to engage in deconstruction. We want to engage in reconstruction. So I want people who are doing that, making a contribution to making us better, have a couple of drinks with it, hopefully not slur too much, and come down with something like drunk history, but but about guys, right? And hopefully teach people not only how to do something in a very functional way, which is drink and think, right? Drinking, I think, is not opposed towards thinking. I think it's a lubricant for it, an accelerant.
Vino Veritas.
It's brought to you by Uber. And the funny thing is,
Diageo.
Andrew and I had a boss once, Fred Smith, over at CEI, and CEI would often be in a position to have to defend the vices and the sins, right? Big pharma, big oil, big tobacco, whatever it was. And I remember we were having conversations about big alcohol, and he was on a program, like a crossfire type program. And Fred Smith said this. He said, "Look," he said, "why are we trying to denigrate alcohol? At a wedding, there's a toast. At a funeral, there's a parting glass.
Jesus' first miracle."
And he said,
Yes.
at a funeral, there's the parting glass. Jesus' first miracle for his mother was to create wine. And the best. It wasn't just wine; it was the best wine.
It was an 83 Margaux.
But the point is that going back to Guy's point, perfection can be the enemy, and functionality is where we should be at, and moving towards perfection. Something that a guy said to me recently, or someone said to me recently, we're all in the process of becoming, and while we're doing that, let's be functional.
That's right. And it's like, and I think I've known a couple of perfectionists who have actually fallen off the rails because they didn't know that lesson.
Yeah.
They didn't know that, they had a little bit of the Icarus, like, this, what I like about functionalism, it's the ground, it's the terror, it's the earth, right?
Sure.
And you can become buoyant on other things, but it's like, this is where you want to have your feet from.
All warfare is ground warfare. Guy Shepherd, planman.com. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys, for the opportunity.
God
You
bless
guys
you,
are
buddy.
good guys. Bye-bye.
And with that, let us go to the bottom line.
The bottom line.
Yeah, Jerry, that was, listen, as we talk about this and the importance of the conversation, that sums it up, doesn't it? That conversation we just had.
Yeah, it does. And again, it's to promote Guy Shepherd's website, Planned Man. It's not for men. It speaks to men. It speaks for men. It speaks about men. But it's also written to everyone in a man's life. So if you have daughters, a wife, a mother, you have a sister, this is for them too. It's interesting. I didn't say this to Guy when he was on, but Super Bowl Sunday, my daughter Bridget was over, and her boyfriend Jack and a friend of theirs, Shannon, and they're all in their 20s.
Yeah.
And I was talking about something, and I said, you know what? There's a real good piece on this at Planned Man. And they all went there, and Bridget, 21 years old, and her friend Shannon, 23 years old, they thought this thing was fantastic.
I'm sitting here thinking about the sort of the basic life skills, and I don't mean, learning how to sew, though I think learning how to iron is probably a good skill. But I was thinking about, learning how to shop. And I'll tell you something.
Yeah.
Speaking to guys, now I don't know.
I know how to iron, by the way. I iron really well.
I've always done the shopping in my house. I don't know how other couples divide it up, but I think there's something to be said for teaching guys how to, for instance, grocery shop.
Yeah.
Obviously beyond the sort of the basic life. So how to start a fire. I could have asked, and then I think you answered the question. I could have asked Guy about the transformation of the Boy Scouts into scouting and how that might have changed things. But I think you answered the question in this idea that the Planned Man, in terms of embracing these skills, the things that we have lost over the years, right? Because you think about it, the reason why, obviously there have been the attacks on the Boy Scouts because they're the Boy Scouts of America, but there's also the attacks on the institution of scouting as outmoded, as antiquated, as being something out of the 1950s. Now, there are obviously still young people who do scouting. I know this is a weird tangent to go down, Jerry, but my point is this: the skills that are taught in scouting. I was driving through my neighborhood. I'll give you an example of this. Was driving through my neighborhood, and there are a bunch of kids who were taking some old, there weren't logs and they weren't sticks. They were sort of in that in-between, branches, and they were trying to build a tree house in a tree. And they just sort of had all the branches sort of laying next to each other. And I'm thinking, if these kids were in scouting, they'd know it's very easy to lash all of these pieces of wood together and actually make a structure. You don't need nails to do this. And there's something lost in all of this. The Guy was talking about buying. Sorry, go ahead.
But again, it's a couple thoughts on this. And look, I learned how to shoot in scouting.
Yeah.
So even a kid living in New Jersey, I was in the Weeblos and before Boy Scouts. I only made it 1 year in the Boy Scouts because I had played football and I was playing baseball and you make choices. But I was in the Cub Scouts, Weeblos, and then 1 year in Boy Scouts. I learned how to shoot a gun in the Boy Scouts. But here's the problem I have. We have a tendency to overcorrect. I'm watching Quantum Leap. You know this.
I was not aware of this.
And in season 5, there seems to be a lot of episodes about women's liberation, and I'm fine with it. But there was this one episode where the man really was overpowering, and he was the king of the house, and you do this, and you better get to your room, and you better have that meal on the table, sort of a thing. And it was like 1971 or whatever. And I thought to myself, no, it wasn't always like that. I mean, my mother was married in 1971. And I assure you that my mother wasn't serving. She served my father because he loved her and he served her. There was a mutual submission, a mutual service. But there really was a male role and a female role. And just because you don't have to be stuck in a role doesn't mean that men and women don't have roles and don't have attributes. Like, for instance, this is part of the problem with the transgendered ideology. I am not a mom.
Yes.
Mothers, females have certain qualities and attributes that I lack. First of which is Sorry, I'm just saying that we have to. We and again, I mentioned
this is part of what got Jennifer Say into trouble at Levi's, right? It wasn't just that she was talking about the COVID issue, but she apparently had voiced her opposition to changing Mother's Day to Birthing Parents Day.
Again,
hold on, time out for a second. Yeah, because it excludes step parents and it excludes adoptive parents.
Sure,
right, and so
But there's nothing wrong if you are a girl and you like so-called girl things, or if you're a boy and 100%. You like so-called boy things. And there's nothing wrong with a girl who likes boy things and a boy who likes girl things. Again, this idea that we have to coerce people using a guy's terminology about progressives. Why can't we just let people be?
Yes,
and live their lives. Yes. And at the same time, there are natural attributes that men have.
Yes.
Men, I'm sorry, by nature, we are more aggressive. Does that mean all men are more aggressive than women? No, of course not. But women are more nurturing. Does it mean that some men aren't more nurturing than women? Of course not.
Let's all play out at the University of Pennsylvania with their swim team, and the guy who was ranked 400 in the 400s in the country,
and now ranked number 1.
Well, but now they're finally changing it. I mean, they're this
no, they didn't. They went back. He can now compete in the championship.
I thought they've had they reversed themselves again.
That, and I'm going to say this, and if we're canceled, we're canceled. That man can dress up in a women's bathing suit and swim as a woman in women's competition. It is the, as a father of 4 daughters, the injustice of that. Imagine spending your entire, and I know how these swim kids are.
Oh yeah.
It is hours and hours in the pool, sacrifice, up late, missed parties and missed family weekends, and it's grammar school, it's middle school, it's high school, and then you're in college, and then you're ranked top 5, and then you are blown away by 15 seconds or 45 seconds in the pool by someone who was, up until a year and a half ago, was swimming as a man
and swimming. I'm not going to say swimming better than I can, but still, in terms of competitive swimming. Hey, before we go, Jerry, I did want to play this because we were gonna pull it up just as we went to this Guy Shepherd thing. This is the situation with this school district meeting. Let me pull this up here. This school board meeting in Glenbrook in Illinois. This story about this guy. Hold on, I want to pull this up. Oh, hold on. I got to do it again because I didn't share the audio. That's the problem. So he goes up to speak about mask mandates, and he takes his mask off to speak. Forget it. I'm not going to bother if there's an ad there. My apologies, guys. And he gets excoriated by a member of the school board. I mean, we really are living in insane times. Sorry, go ahead.
I want you to finish your point, but I was going to offer some support of your point. Yeah. I'm not sure what year the Kinks wrote Lola.
I think 1971.
All right, so early 70s, late 60s time, and the lyric from the song, and again, I might be getting it right, but girls will be boys,
70.
Boys will be girls.
Yeah, it's a mixed up, muddled up, shook up world, except for Lola.
Today, for that song to be edgy, the lyric would have to be changed. Girls will be girls.
Yes.
And boys will be boys. Because we have so confused right and wrong. And again, I'm a one note nanny on this, but it is outrageous that today, February 16th, 2022, that there are children going to school with masks on.
Yes.
It is an insanity. It is a cruelty.
But
what happened with this guy? So this guy takes his mask off, and go ahead.
Sorry, the guy takes his mask off to go speak. Now he is, I would say, listen, I've been to school board meetings. He is, let's say, at least a dozen feet away from the nearest board member. And the chairman says you need to put your mask on, and the guy's like, well, I have an exemption. And by the way, when the president speaks, when Governor Pritzker of Illinois speaks, he doesn't wear a mask. So I don't know why. Can I get my time reset? And they go back and forth for a couple of minutes here. And one of the board members gets very angry at the situation. And he's like, no, you need to put your mask on. The chairman of the board is going to let him, or the president of the board is like, okay, whatever. Listen, just say what you're going to say. But the one school board member who is in no risk whatsoever from getting anything from this guy, he is insistent that the virtue signaling continue, right? He is insistent. And he starts yelling at him, essentially cursing at him, put the effing mask on. I mean, this is where we are here, at a point where there is, it is all about the acquiescence, and it's all about the obedience to the dogma. Go ahead.
Well, again, I mean, you're right. And we said this earlier, science should never be dogma.
Yes.
And also, I like guys 4 Fs. Dr. Fauci, he effed up. The public health establishment effed up. We have made myriad mistakes. We should be correcting them. We should be fessing up. We should be fixing it, and then we should be looking for forgiveness. Here's the bottom line when it comes to COVID-19. We should have focused on early treatment. We didn't. Because we did not, there are thousands of people dead who shouldn't be dead. Masks, never. There is no data, no metric. There's no data.
I know there's no data.
I mean, the fact of the matter is,
really careful about how we say this.
Like the metric showing the effectiveness of universal mask mandates is yet to be written. There is no evidence for it. Vaccines, again, vaccines are critical. But we should have told the truth about vaccines from the very beginning and keep people informed. I don't understand.
Most importantly, just full stop for a second, Jerry. Most importantly, all of this should be about the discussion. All of this, right? As we get more information, things are going to change. Listen, I want to shift gears because I don't want to sort of get wrapped around the axle about COVID, because we didn't have enough time, and had we had more time today, because we've got this Hillary Clinton campaign story going on.
Oh my goodness. As of right now, right? CBS, NBC, CNN. No, CNN, I think, has done 2 minutes on it.
Yeah.
I don't understand. This is the greatest political scandal in my lifetime. And the major news outlets have yet to even discuss it.
Well, anything right of, I don't even know if it's been in the Hill, but let's say anything right of the Hill has been virtually silent about this. And at the same time, right, we have the continued attacks on Joe Rogan. This piece, I am going to pull it up to share the screen. This piece from Sunday, Jerry, I'm sure you saw it. The headline at CNN: Joe Rogan's use of the N-word is another January 6th moment. They wound up actually changing that headline. But this is
yeah, I know. I agree with CNN because January 6th, the January 6th committee, the nonsense about insurrection is a big zero. It's a big non-story.
Yes, this is not the point they were trying to make.
I know that, but I agree. But I'll turn it around for my benefit. And again, just on this issue, all this video of Joe Rogan using the N-word, it went viral. It turns out that this was a political campaign. This was a paid for organized campaign. Now, the irony is that someone pointed out that, well, Joe Biden has used the N-word.
Yes.
And then, of course, the CNNs and the Washington Post come out and say, well, you can't take it out of context. Well, with Joe Rogan, every time he used that word, it was to demonstrate how evil and wrong and ugly that word is. And so therefore, again, it shows Joe Biden can say the N-word, Joe Rogan cannot.
Yeah, and more to the point, when Jerry talks about the attacks on Joe Rogan being a political campaign,
it is.
That is not hyperbole.
No.
We now understand
an organized campaign.
A pair of brothers who have a super PAC that they have been behind almost all of this in terms of pushing this issue. I'm not sure, Jerry, has it ever been made clear as to why they are so opposed to Joe Rogan per se?
No, they're not opposed to Joe Rogan. However, if you follow those who are if you follow those who are keeping an eye on this, and Joe Rogan has been pretty good at pointing out this fact. They're doing this. Remember, the midterms are coming up, and 2024 is coming up. The reason why this political action committee did it was because if they could get 100 million hits saying that Joe Rogan has to go, then who wouldn't hire them? If they could take on and take down Joe Rogan, well, my goodness, if you're running for president, you want us on your team.
So it really is like Aldo the Apache and Inglourious Bastards. They want their scalps.
Yeah.
And they're going to get their scalps. Hey, before I let you go, have you seen, by the way, if you're not watching Reacher on Amazon,
it's great.
It is amazing.
It is great.
It's
great. It's just great.
We are now,
I don't have any criticism,
just over halfway through it. So we're it's rocketing to a conclusion.
My only criticism is that season 2 hasn't dropped yet.
Yes, I know we're gonna have to wait a while for that. Have you been following this? Oh, good Lord, this the new movie that's coming out with Sandra Bullock, and I think it's Ryan Reynolds. It looks like it looks like a Romancing the Stone almost.
Is it Ryan Reynolds or is it the guy from the striptease movie?
Oh yeah, you're right, Michael.
Tatum.
Yeah, Channing Tatum. That's exactly what it is.
Thank you.
And then Brad Pitt is. Hold on, now I got to look this up. Sandra,
I've seen the trailer. So apparently, she's a movie star, and he wants a part, and she gets kidnapped. He thinks it's a joke. It's not a joke. It's the real thing. I don't know.
It's called The Lost City, and Daniel, what's his name? Daniel Radcliffe plays the villain. Yeah. But what I love is the fact that Brad Pitt is gonna. He becomes like the savior of all of this.
Is Radcliffe getting pigeonholed as a villain?
Oh, right, because he was in that other movie, the one with the illusionists, right? He did the second one.
Yeah, he was also the bad guy. Wasn't he the bad guy in? Oh, we're so bad with movies. The woman who played Wonder Woman,
Gal Gadot.
She was in a movie with the guy who does the show In Between Two Ferns.
Zach Galifianakis,
right? That movie, wasn't he the bad guy in that movie too?
I don't know why.
Actually, I have no idea. So here, we got to get.
But it's possible.
We got to get guys
there was
on the
that
show.
movie. There was that movie. Now You See It, right?
Yes,
which was the illusionist movie, and the second one should have been called Now You've Seen It, or now you see it again. Well, it's like someone said that they should do a sequel to That Thing You Do.
That's a great movie.
Great movie, but they should do a sequel that's like 20 years later. That's like a VH1 documentary about what happened to all the band members.
Yep.
Called That Thing We Did.
Well, by the way, the guy who Spartacus, the drummer.
Yes. Yeah.
There is a sequel to that movie.
What?
La La Land.
Wait, La La Land. Wait. You're saying La La Land?
You gotta go Google it. Google La La Land and that thing you do. And because Spartacus turns up as I think her, I don't want to be a spoiler here, but turns out to be her husband, and he's in a jazz band.
Yeah, La La Land. Tom Everett Scott on his surprise role. Damon Chazelle on La La Land of That Thing You Do.
See,
I will go look now. Now I need to go see La La Land.
It's like in terms of weird sequels, My Blue Heaven, a sequel to Goodfellas.
Wait, okay,
yeah, absolutely.
Wait, what?
Absolutely.
So you're saying that Steve Martin's character is Henry Hill?
Yes, I'm not saying it. He is.
Okay. I understand that he is a mobster who has gone into the
I'm telling you
program.
that those who are involved in the movie business will tell you that My Blue Heaven is a unorthodox sequel to Goodfellas.
Well, I kind of wish Ray Liotta had played that character. Not that I don't like Steve Martin, and not that I don't like Rick Moranis, and not that I don't like Joan Cusack, but now I'm wondering how what was it? His name was Todd. How Ray Liotta would have been a better Todd.
By the way, My Blue Heaven, I think, is another great underrated movie. It's just fantastic.
No, and it's been on cable quite a bit. Jerry,
yes.
What do you got going on?
Oh my goodness! Well, I'm on WBAL this Saturday and Sunday.
Wow!
Saturday 11 to 2, Sunday for the Jerry Rogers Show, and then I'm filling in next week. I don't know, Thursday, Friday, or Wednesday, Thursday, something like that for Dan Joseph. And a buddy of mine, Kevin O'Rourke, a buddy of mine, he and I are going to go see Jordan Peterson next week. Yeah. So
that's good. That's very good. Well, I am not going to CPAC. CPAC's supposed to be next week. We actually, we need to see if we can get Matt Schlapp on beforehand. I'm not sure that's going to happen. But Jerry, I know you want to tell people to do what?
Oh my goodness, we find the truth, plant your feet, stand firm. God bless you.
Have a great week, everybody.
All right.
Have fun and stay safe.